Okay, looks like we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Honey Badger Radio. My name is Brian, and this is HBR Talk with our hosts, Hannah Wallen and Lauren Brooks. Um, on today's show, we're going to be trying to finish off a video we started to respond to last week. We are about halfway through it, so I think that we can do it.
Which is amazing. I have to say, I think we have to have the record on turning videos into like the longest segments ever.
Yeah.
I think the last show we did, it was like 30 seconds of the video took like a half an hour to get through.
I know.
I'll tell you what, though, the way that these people do their videos and everything, it explains why the term Gish Gallop is a legitimate term for a logic fallacy.
Yeah.
And like, if you understand the history of what that term means, it is valid. Like, you just throw out a bunch of claims with no supporting evidence, and then the other person has to take, half an hour giving supporting evidence against your claims. And that's basically what we end up doing. Plus, we're going to respond emotionally to this shit because it is exasperating and crazy.
Yeah.
You have to respond to the crazy.
Yeah. So last week, I think it was last week. Yeah, we did this Piers Morgan video where he had on two women and a man. I don't want to speak to anyone's ideology per se, but I know that the man on the right there, he is a frequent sort of, host on Lotus Eaters. And they're basically discussing the Me Too movement and whether or not, it's maybe ruined dating for men and women, if it's done any harm, what have you. It hasn't gone too far, the usual stuff, because recently Piers Morgan had Andrew Tate on, and Andrew Tate, I guess, and then before that he had Jordan Peterson on, and I guess that they represent some kind of, internet idea about masculinity, even though they're probably, they probably would agree on more than people would suspect, but not in the ways that guys like Piers Morgan would frame it. Like, they don't hate women. That's ridiculous, right?
Right.
So anyway, so they that happened, and now he's bringing on these new guests. And I will say this: the woman on the left, she seems to be really worried about the state of dating and relationships for men and women. She doesn't want, for men to feel as though they can simply be accused of things. Doesn't like the Me Too movement. The woman in the middle thinks that the Me Too movement is just the start, and that, we have to reduce sexual assault, and it's the most important thing, I guess. And I guess I don't know if it's a misunderstanding, but she seems to think that, like, if a boy is visiting a girl and they like each other, and the boy is sort of stumbling to figure out what, where the lines are at that he should not cross and what lines he can cross, and it's always awkward for everyone involved, right? She seems to think that is basically sexual assault, and it's not a gray area, and men shouldn't be doing it.
And the problem with it is, girls have a habit of refusing to tell. Like, you can ask, is this okay, and stuff like that, and they'll say yes, and later on, they'll say, well, I was really a little uncomfortable with that, and that's the same for you as if they said no.
Yeah.
And, and if you don't ask, and you just fumble around together, and you're making out, and she's doing things, and you're doing things, and both of you are advancing it, his advancements of it, as opposed to her advancements of it, can turn around on him as an assault allegation. And I think women need to be in a position where their daughters are in danger of facing the same kind of allegations over the same kind of things that boys face allegations over. Because until girls go through that, they will not understand why it's unfair, or they won't care that it's unfair.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to continue the video. At this point, I believe that the gentleman on the right here is about to, because, you know, there was talk about Harvey Weinstein, which I believe we addressed. And this guy's going to bring up Aziz Ansari, who is an actor, comedian, Indian guy, you know, and he had a really awkward date, and like,
oh yeah,
yeah,
she engaged in a sex act on him, didn't show any sign of being upset about it, didn't show any sign of not wanting to do it, and then turned around later and tried to Me Too him.
Yeah, exactly. So let's play this clip.
Aziz Ansari, right? Hot off the heels of Me Too, hot off the heels of Harvey Weinstein rightly being dragged through the courts, and it should have got way worse than just prison time, in my opinion. Aziz Ansari had a consensual relationship with a woman. She felt a bit awkward, and afterwards rescinded consent, and he was lumped in, and he had his career.
No, I'm with you on that one.
Cancelled.
I'm with you.
So then why should men be afraid of that?
Because he didn't touch her without consent, did he?
No, but she rescinded his consent, and
how are
she
young
saw
boys
that
supposed to navigate this, the whole thing? I'm thinking of my teenage son. You know, he's 14, 15. What's he supposed to say? Would you mind if I put
Isabel,
my
you are an
hand
extremely strong woman. I know in your house you're teaching them the difference between assault and then coming on to someone. I know you are.
But what we're talking about is it's been very interesting watching the Me Too movement and the Time's Up movement, how it's all developed. Because a lot of very bad people, Harvey Weinstein and others, got their due comeuppance. We can all agree with that.
Yeah.
This is not even something to be debated. We're really talking about the grey line.
Actually, I think it is.
Where is that grey line? How do you navigate it?
Yeah.
When you're an experienced adult and you've been around the block in many ways, you can navigate that much more intelligently and with emotional intelligence than you can if you're a teenage boy. And I think the point Isabel makes is a good one. I've had 3 sons in their 20s. I've always taught them to be respectful to women, and I believe they are. But I do think it's really hard for a 16, 17-year-old boy now in this environment to know even how to start
they are all
having
terrified.
some kind of physical relationship with a woman.
Those good boys are all terrified. I know that from talking to my son. He's just like, I'm just not going there. Is that healthy?
Yes, I think it is, actually. I think it's better to not have a physical relationship than to have one that could ruin a woman's life.
But then how does...
See, that claim just drives me nuts, because your life isn't ruined by an uncomfortable situation. Hell, my life wasn't even ruined by a violent sexual assault. I still went on and had a life. I have a husband and family. I've had many jobs. I usually have more than one at a time. I like that's not life ruining. I didn't end up in jail. I go outside when I want to go outside. I go places when I want to go places. You know, traveled to other countries without the rest of my family. Not ruined, but getting Me Too'd, that can ruin your life. Going to jail can ruin your life. Having your reputation destroyed because somebody has labeled you something that people treat as if it makes you a monster. And not a damaged person, that ruins your life, right? And especially if you did nothing wrong and you end up with that label, you can get forced into perpetrator programs that gaslight you. I still remember being told by the fellow who had the case where he was accused of having 3 hands. And the courts did not catch the fact that his accuser's story required him to have 3 hands. And they forced him into a perpetrator program. And the beginning stage of the perpetrator program was that he had to admit the crime. But if he admitted the crime in therapy, it could be used against him in court and used against him in his appeals. So he was stuck in the beginning stage of this therapy and accused of failing to cooperate with therapy that required him to confess to something he did not do in order to move forward. This is life ruining. Like, that could be more traumatic. Probably is more traumatic than having someone force themselves on you.
And No, so they just kind of they asked the question, but they just glossed over the obvious answer, right? Well, how are you supposed to teach a young man how to deal with women, right? Well, the real answer is that you kind of really can't, because it doesn't matter what you teach that young man. Women have the authority to move the goalpost at any whim. You know, and she can manipulate you. She can make you think that she wants to go down this road because she gets some perverse, joy out of, winding you up and then letting you down. That's not that also has to be taught to young men too, how to realize when a woman is just playing you, just using you.
Yeah.
But that's not what this discussion is about. It's all focused on what the responsibilities are of the young man and how he's supposed to treat the woman. It's nothing in the other direction.
Right. Even if she lies, because with her being able to move the goalpost, she can make a lie valid. And she can turn it around later, and it doesn't count as a lie. It just means that he didn't fully obtain consent.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going, I guess.
How do they ever start?
Well, don't. If you're not 100% sure,
are we going
don't.
for?
What are you going to have? A bunch of neutered boys who never
But it's
had...
so obvious.
We actually do
It's
have
sort
that.
of
Gen Z is having far less sexual relationships than any ever
they
before.
are. It's true.
And
young people have stopped having sex.
I agree with the first part of your sentence, actually. If you're not willing to have a sexual relationship with clearly defined lines, don't have one. And so I actually told my mates at university, don't sleep around with girls. 1, girls don't bring a guy home that you don't know what he's capable of. 2, guys, don't bring a girl home if you think that possibly she could have a false accusation against you.
Can I make another point here?
Which I find, I mean, look, that sentence to me, when I was your age, right? How old are you?
23.
23. When I was your age, the idea you would even have that sort of thought process.
Yeah, I
would
wouldn't
be
have those sort of mates that would ever cross the line, so I wouldn't have to have that conversation with any of my friends.
Don't throw my mates in with a bunch of violent people.
And is there...
So she's...
Yeah, she's...
Yeah. I'll go back a little bit so we can hear the whole thing, in case you guys missed it, because I know there's a lot of people talking over.
Have those sort of mates that would ever cross the line.
No, let me
See, that's the thing. Feminists talk about false allegations as if you only face a false allegation if you did something wrong, because they don't understand the meaning of the word false. It is false because you did nothing wrong, and the person making the allegation is a liar. They're a liar whether they said yes and then changed their mind later and decided that their yes was meaningless. Or they said yes and they're now claiming they felt compelled to say yes when they really meant no. Or, they engaged in an action that they initiated and then turned it around as if you did something to them. They're still a liar. It doesn't matter. If the thing never happened, then they're an even bigger liar, right? But in any case, if the allegation is false, the accuser is a liar.
Yes. Yeah, of course. If the
means the guy did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Right? They don't get it. They don't get it. They don't believe that women's statements can be false. They think of it as if a woman says it, by virtue of being said by a woman, it becomes true.
23.
23. When I was your age, the idea you would even have that sort of thought process.
Yeah, I
would
wouldn't
be
have those sort of mates that would ever cross the line, so I wouldn't have to have that conversation with any of my friends.
Don't throw my mates in with a bunch of violent people.
And is there a certain purity here I'm detecting in a certain type of feminist who thinks that they're all unimpeachable and that this is all one-way traffic and that only men can be toxic?
No, I
because I've got to enlighten you. I've met
that was good.
Yeah, and of course she's denying it. She even denies being a feminist is really strange.
But it's what she just did.
She's totally acting like one, but yeah.
can be toxic.
No, I
because I've got to enlighten you. I've met quite a few women in my life who are pretty toxic themselves, and I don't see the debate being framed around that at all.
No, but the point is that we're still in a situation where only 5% of rape cases actually even go to trial,
which is ridiculous.
But that's the extreme end of it, isn't it?
Well, no. That's not true either.
Right.
Because she's counting things as cases. Like I've looked into this.
Allegation is being treated like it's a case.
Well, no, that's it. That's it.
Followed up on, right?
No, that's not correct. The thing that I learned from feminists is that this statistic is based not on allegations made to the police, but statistics from surveys and allegations made to domestic violence victims advocacy organizations and rape survivor assistance organizations that do like therapy and stuff like that. So if you go to an organization that's supposed to help rape victims recover, but you haven't gone to the police and you're not going to go to the police, and you just go there for therapy after an incident, and you don't want to go through the whole prosecution thing because you don't care that your perpetrator might offend against somebody else, right? That counts as in that number. That percentage is not an indictment, a valid indictment of the police. But they talk about it like it's a valid indictment of the police when the police don't actually get a chance to even investigate a large number of those cases. And then they also talk about it like this only happens to women. But when a man goes to the police with an allegation, he's at risk of having it turned around on him and being investigated as a perpetrator instead of a victim. And that's happened a few times. That's happened more than a few times. It happens with domestic violence, and it happens with sexual assault. A woman comes in and says, "No, he didn't. I didn't do that to him. He did that to me." And suddenly, her refusal or her lack of consent that she's claiming now matters more than his lack of consent or his refusal in the moment. And so there's two issues with it, but she won't bring those up. She's just going to talk about this like she's talking about allegations made directly to police that get ignored. And she's not going to admit that among those allegations that do get made to police that don't make it to trial, some of those don't make it to trial because it is proved to the police, to the investigators during the course of their investigation that the accuser is a liar who made up an allegation or who misrepresented the events. And they don't bring a case against her for wasting their time in the UK or for filing a false complaint, which you can be charged for here in the United States. So she's really misrepresenting the statistic, egregiously misrepresenting the statistic.
Absolutely. Lauren, were you going to say something too, or?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm.
All right. I'm going to move on, but first I got to read some super chows. They are from yesterday's show, but sometimes people send these things in after my show ends, so I apologize if the context on these is really weird. Anonymous gives us $5 and says 1,000 flyers have been handed out, countless tweets have been made. The Columbus, Ohio peace rally at Thurber Park this Saturday, featuring Scott Horton and Misty Winston, starts at noon. Peace sells. Are you buying? I don't know. I guess I'll have to look into it. I don't even know what it is. That did not come up on the show yesterday, but thank you for the donation. Meredith G gives us $5 and says, for Gunn to be successful, is going to have to be good at selecting talent to direct the movies that his skill set doesn't fit. Yes, I agree. We're talking about James Gunn, the director, and now CEO of most of Warner Brothers DC Comics wing. And then she gives us $5 and says, how successful Gunn will depend on his ability to select good creators for the projects that doesn't fit his storytelling skill set. Supposedly, he is a fan of comics. So thank you guys for those super chows. Now we're going to move on through the next part of this video.
I just real quick want to give a shout out to D Live for labeling us mature.
Oh,
That's a fail.
I don't buy it, but
They don't know us very well.
I don't think in all my years anyone has ever called me mature.
yeah.
Ridiculous.
But that's the extreme end of it,
Yeah.
isn't
The
it?
idea-
You're talking
but
about
I'm
rape
talking
here.
about-
But David, we can all agree
assault.
that's wrong. We can all agree that's wrong.
But okay, so even on the extreme end of it, rape doesn't even go to trial. If you're assaulted, and
What?
that's life changing.
Yeah.
What happened to Rose McGowan
Yeah.
with Harvey
I
Weinstein?
know Rose well.
Was
Yeah, but these are
life
extreme
changing, and
things.
she didn't get her comeuppance.
Yeah, but
She
Ava, we'd
lost
all
her
agree about
career.
that. Well, I think what has sent a shudder through all of our spines from your mouth today is the line that all young men should be terrified of any physical
assaulting
contact. Well,
someone.
no, you didn't say it like
didn't
that.
say that.
You said basically of starting any physical contact with a
Unless
woman.
you're sure.
Well,
Unless
how
you're
does a
How are you
16,
supposed to
17-year-old
be
boy
sure?
know?
When she can rescind consent on something completely nebulous.
Okay, can I ask you this? If
Yes.
you were going to
All right, I'm just gonna pause there for a second.
Well, it's interesting that she can't acknowledge that women should be honest about their consent. The one thing that would make sexual interaction work is that if we're going to require men to ask at every step, then women should not be allowed to lie at any step, even if they're not comfortable giving an honest answer, even if they don't like the response they're going to get. You know, you still have to tell the truth. You're required to tell the truth. And if you have made a statement, you're held to it. You don't get to go back later and say, well, I lied. I wasn't comfortable. I didn't agree to this. I just didn't feel comfortable admitting that in the moment. And that's your fault. You don't get to do that. You know, because he's required to ask and get an answer and act on that answer. So that answer now constitutes a contract. You're under oath when you say yes. You know, like that's what needs to happen in order for relationships to continue to exist. And I honestly think that feminists are doing this to eliminate heterosexual relationships.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. They don't want men and women to be able to navigate not just like the sexual arena, but like the relationship arena at all. Their goal, and it is what is working right now, is to essentially create an environment of distrust between men and women, where women are afraid that men are going to assault them, rape them, abuse them, or something, and or use them, you know, like just use them sexually. And men are afraid that women are going to, you know, manipulate and make allegations to destroy them or to get something that they have, or, you know, just take pleasure in, you know, emotional destruction or whatever it is. And there are men and women out there that will do that, but they're taking that and they're amplifying it so much. And of course, they're doing this with what seems like sympathy for women, which basically only makes the men feel more monstrous. And
well, and remember, taking over a society, the process of taking over a society, one of the parts of that process is to weaken the relationships between women and men, because it's men who will physically defend the society.
Yeah.
And if you take everything away from men, you weaken them, you make them vulnerable, you make it easier to take them down, the women will just join the new society. They'll just join the new culture. So, and in terms of this, you can see that happening with women and feminists. Feminists argue these standards into place, but women use them.
All right, let's keep going.
If you were going to take someone to bed and you weren't 100% sure that they wanted to go to bed with you, would you go with them?
No, I would not do that.
Then
But the
that's what
point
I'm
was,
talking
Aziz
about.
Ansari was sure, for example, and then later she went and published a long piece about how she regretted it and lumped him in with Harvey Weinstein.
I mean,
Is that
Ava,
okay?
Ava, do you feel any of it, Ava's gone too far? Do you think the pendulum has gone too far at all?
No. No, I don't think it's gone far enough, actually.
Really?
I don't think we've brought anything into schools. To your point, we haven't brought any teaching into school about what is assault, what isn't. If you're worried about
That's
like,
a lie.
boys not
It's a school.
Like, you've got, she hasn't been to school in a few years. Like, that's actually part of the curriculum now, and it's been part of the curriculum for like 15 years.
I mean, that if your kid makes it that far without the school convincing them to change their gender.
Yeah, that's today. But like, I mean, when my son was in elementary school, and they start sex ed in elementary school, they start talking about boundaries and consent in elementary school.
Yeah.
And they go the training, like, it's been in colleges for, oh gosh, I went through it, a consent training in the 90s. They didn't call it that, but it was feminist consent training, 1992. So, like, they were doing that back then, and they expanded into high schools, within a few years after that. And it's been in elementary schools. Consent training has been in elementary schools for at least 15 years, if not more. Like, where are her kids? Oh, she doesn't have kids. She doesn't know anything about a school system. She's just talking out of her ass.
So it seems. All right, let's go a little bit further.
not understanding what it is, bring in sexual health lessons. Teach it.
The idea that you can teach rapists not to rape is insane, because they already know.
What do you mean?
That it's illegal. Okay, right. You're saying
what do you mean?
boys wouldn't know what's assault and what isn't.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. The idea that rather than taking the power out of someone who can make a false accusation is what they're actually, most of them are concerned about. Specifically, my friends, for example, who would never dream of doing something like that. But then what the feminists fail to understand is you can educate evils. Did you not identify yourself as a feminist study?
No, I didn't actually.
Oh, okay,
Piers
sorry.
called me
Piers
that.
You're not a
did, so
feminist?
then that's...
But Piers labelled me.
Actually, I called you a
Okay.
toxic feminist.
Good grief.
Okay, then that's my appreciation.
She's just it's like somebody claiming to believe everything that it takes to be of a particular religious faith, and then saying, but I'm not part of that religious faith. Like, yes, you are. Sorry, but you're in the cult. You may not go to meetings or be part of an organization or whatever, but you are practicing the religion, lady.
Yeah. If you bang your wife through a sheet, we know who you are.
All right.
Fair enough. But you cannot, if a rapist is willing to violate the law so violently, you cannot teach him out of that. All you can have is very harsh punishments to deter
No, because
that.
you're talking about the grey line, and the grey line is at parties of not understanding that when a woman is so inebriated that she can't stand up, boys need to understand that is
Well,
no.
that's a different
Now
line.
you're
That's a
bringing in
different line.
something else. Ava, I would like
Yeah.
to know whether you...
So she's bringing up the gray line, which is kind of what this whole thing appears to be about, because think about it, okay? It's basically like what they're talking about, not the woman in black, but the others, all the other people, is a boy goes on a date with a girl, and we don't know, it doesn't matter where they go. Could be a party, could be a movie, could be dinner, whatever. That's not important. After it's over, the boy and the girl decide to go back to someone's place, whether it's his or hers. And they're really into each other, and and they're sitting on the couch next to each other, and the boy really wants to get closer, or the girl does, or they both do. But that's where the gray area begins, because we don't know. It's not very clear who is interested in who. And so, I remember going on a date once when I was in my early 20s, and even then I was really worried about taking too much initiative, because I didn't know what the woman would think. Because if let's say they went on the date with me the entire time because they thought they were being nice, or because they wanted me to pay for their food, And so it's possible. I mean,
Mm.
I know
There are women on dating sites that use the dating site for just free food.
Yep.
Just so people know, that's a real thing.
And brag about it on social media.
Yeah, and I had no. I mean, she was somebody that I worked with for a little while, and then she like went to another location, but we stayed in touch. So it wasn't like if she had done that, you know, to burn me, it would be like a crazy idea that would not benefit her because she was living in a different part of the city at the time and she was working at a different location. But we did meet, right? And then, so, you know, we decided to go to Chinatown and just sort of walk around and talk. And then we sat on the steps of like a building or something. And I was like, I knew I wanted to like maybe try to get a kiss or something, but I was worried. I was worried that it's something that she didn't want. And I'm not blaming her. It's not like she was, you know, sending mixed signals or anything. I didn't honestly know. But then she initiated and took the risk and, you know, grabbed me and kissed me. And then I knew, obviously, it was okay. So, but those things aren't going to happen very often. You know,
right.
like women don't generally take the initiative. They just keep sending signals out and that stays like, and men don't often catch them. Sorry, but we're bad at that. So, you know, men understand better if they're just told directly. Like that's generally the best way.
When they bring alcohol into the equation, there's another thing that needs to be discussed there.
That's what she's doing on purpose, though. But yeah.
Well, and the thing is, they talk about this as if guys don't know that passed out drunk woman is not consenting, right? And guys know that, right? There's two kinds of people. There's people who admit they know that, and there's people who are sexually violent, and that's both sexes. Both sexes do that, right? And clearly, engaging in a sex act on somebody is not the same thing as drawing on their face with a marker, drawing a dick on their face with a marker, which you still shouldn't do, because if somebody's inebriated at that state, you should check their pulse and make sure they're not dying. But in any case, it raises the question, right? Guys don't want to be in a position where their action or even their inaction can be considered a sexual assault. Because if a woman is that drunk, but she's still conscious and she's able to, you know, climb all over him and try to initiate a sex act herself, he can still be accused later on. I think when a woman does that, when she's completely inebriated and she's beyond the capacity to consent to sex, if she tries to initiate anyway, the guy should have the option to file a sexual assault complaint. Like, she couldn't consent, but she tried to initiate anyway. I feel violated, right? Because I would feel put in a position where I'm at risk of being accused of doing something when I was the target. She put me in a position of having to defend myself against her actions, and I'm not allowed an avenue to do that. Like, men should be able to say that and then turn around and say, I want to press charges because she felt me up while she was too inebriated to consent. And anything I did in that situation could have gotten me accused of something, right? That would be fair. But I'll bet this woman wouldn't agree to that.
Oh no, definitely not.
Yeah.
And neither would most men be willing to go down that road, right? Because I think a lot of guys figure, you know, if they have an interaction with a woman and they get out of it and they're relatively unscathed, then, no harm, no foul, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah, guys are a lot more forgiving than women.
They are way more forgiving than women, and it would be nice to see more men turn the tables on these women to make them understand that this is not okay. This is just because you do it, it doesn't make it right, and I don't know. I just don't think that men would do that. But,
No.
it highlights this unspoken rule that everybody knows exists, but nobody really pays much attention to. And that is, within every relationship, there's always going to be one party that's more interested than the other, right? Just as a general rule. I mean, even in my own relationship, I'm head over heels, I'm crazy about this guy. But, I think the good thing about our relationship is that neither one of us knows who's more crazy about the other one. But, in every situation, there's always going to be one party that wants a little bit more than what the other is willing to give. And it's difficult to navigate, especially if one party is not being honest about their true intentions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, that's the important thing, and we're in a situation now where men are required to be honest about their true intentions. But not only are women not required to be honest about their true intentions, it's offensive if you treat them like their word matters.
Yeah.
And this is a fundamental difference between men and women, right? Men, boys, they grow up understanding honor. They learn honor. They learn that there are consequences to people not valuing your word, to people not trusting your word. And if you prove to people that your word is not trustworthy, they will never trust it again, right? You have to maintain your reputation. You have to maintain your honor. Women don't face that in Western culture. They face it in honor cultures, but they don't face it in Western culture.
Yeah.
So, there are many instances where a woman can just. I feel like a lot of times women are think they're manipulating reality when they manipulate words, and they're not. Right? It doesn't change reality when you tell a lie. That's why it's a lie. And I think I think a lot of times they think that if they describe something, that makes it true. They don't. It doesn't compute that a lie is a lie, even if they say it, and that their reputation matters, and that if they're known to be a liar, if they destroy that reputation, that people don't have to trust them after that. And so you end up in a situation where women, they don't even have a concept of the reputation of their word. And it turns relationships into a minefield for both sexes.
Absolutely. All right, I got a super chat from Senior Sticks, who gives us $2 and says, "Can foodie engagements become a thing and weddings?" Thank you, Senior Sticks.
I wonder if he meant at weddings.
I'm not sure. I'm just reading them as they're written.
Yeah. I think a lot of receptions are catered, so you go to the reception and there's like always, good food and good music, and a lot of people take a date to a wedding, take their +1 to a wedding.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I'm sure they do, but that I'm just saying I wasn't sure if that was supposed to be and or at, but I'm just gonna read it as and because that's how he wrote it. And I'm going to ask that you guys proofread before you click the send button. Otherwise, I am just going to read it as is written, and it may not make any sense. So, I'm not an interpreter. I just read the
then you'll sound like a feminist.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
It just adds to the chaos. All right, and then I got a super chow from Egregious Charles for $5, and he says, "It's probably a good sign if feminists are pretending not to be feminists." Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this woman is one. She does seem bothered by the fact that everyone assumes that she is. And so it's almost like she knows that there's a lot of stigma, like negative stigma. But the other thing too, though, is it's probably a good idea, and I think this might be a fair thing to say. It's probably a good idea not to address a woman like this, not to address arguments that she has not made. So what I mean is that there's tons of standard feminist arguments, and they're all dying to be like debunked, smashed, and destroyed. But if this woman didn't make any of those arguments, I wouldn't bring it up, because you're running the risk of characterizing her positions when you're not actually talking about those positions. Now, there's a pretty good chance she holds those positions, but I wouldn't do that, because then it seems like you're not really being fair to her position. So if you're talking about the gray area, on a date, or like the which is what I was talking about, alluding to earlier, if you're talking about the gray area where it's like, what do I do first? How do I approach, getting closer? Do I even bother? Blah, blah, blah. And that's what she's talking about. Then you should just stick to that and not bring up like, here's what feminists always say. Don't do that.
Yeah, but she brought up alcohol.
She did, and I think it was completely out of the blue. Like, I would have said, well, that's got nothing to do with what we're saying, because we didn't talk about women getting drunk,
right?
And also men get drunk too. So like, what's that about?
And also men and women can interact without alcohol.
Yeah, they also interact without alcohol.
Ladies.
Like, yeah, I know. So, all right. Anyway.
Accept that women, and particularly teenage girls and young women, sometimes give out pretty mixed signals. They give out mixed messages. They're not even sure what they want at any given time.
I think we're victim blaming.
I don't think
I
that's
think-
Oh
No,
my
we're
God.
not.
No, we're not. Because first you have to have a victim, lady, and you haven't established that. So shut the fuck up. Okay?
Yeah, this is why I don't believe her when she says she's not a feminist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's using all the talking points. But I mean, again, if she really doesn't want to call herself one, I'm fine with that. I want the label to die.
She doesn't have to call herself anything. I am fine using all of the words in my vocabulary to call her what I
to deny that what she's saying is feminist ideology, so that it doesn't redeem it if she says it's not feminist ideology. And that's
Right.
They need to point that out. Like, you can spout feminist ideology all day and say that you're not a feminist, and that because you're saying it and it's not feminist ideology, but it doesn't redeem the fact that you're saying women should be allowed to lie and get away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a feminist. I just say the exact same things that the feminists say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I just don't dye my hair weird colors, but I'm not a feminist. I just blah 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 blah. Men are the problem.
You gotta watch out for the blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We learned that from Charlie the Unicorn. You gotta watch out for the blah blah blah.
We are straying into
Come
a
off
point.
it. Every sinew of your body knows what she just said.
Do you
has a
accept
merit
women
to it.
can sometimes
It's a
give
woman
off
saying it
mixed
too, come on.
messages? Come on, they
Look,
can.
I mean, sure, but
That's
I'm
a
not.
non-denial.
But I'm sure,
Yeah.
but I'm talking about assault.
So how are you
No, but
supposed
I don't
to?
think any of us disagree about assault. We're talking about the far greyer line of young teenage fumblings.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they've all stopped having sex, it's because they are actually terrified. And I think it's a great shame if they're terrified into actually having no physical interaction with opposite
Exactly
sex.
that. And then the
How do
other
we get
point,
past
can I
that?
make one other point, which is this whole thing of dredging up allegations that are 10 or 20 years old, I think is absolutely awful.
Why?
Because it's a he said, she said. It's
Isabel,
impossible to
why?
prove. And there are people.
Oh my God, why is this so bad? Because now you have a generation of young men who don't even understand how they're supposed to interact with your daughters.
Because
Okay,
it takes away due process.
Yes.
Because 10 years ago, he might have been able to preserve the evidence it took to defend himself. But if you wait 10 years and you make the allegation, you just took away his ability to do that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't know. Seems like she really wants to be able to hold this power over men. Awfully sounds like a feminist to me, but okay, let's keep. Peter Lloyd's not gone. He still makes videos,
But
Yeah.
he's not. Is he on Twitter? Because I was looking
No,
for him the other
no.
day.
If you're talking about, I don't know about that, but he's on YouTube and he occasionally puts up like short videos. He's been
Okay.
he was doing it for a while and then he wasn't doing it for a few years. Now he's doing it again. And they're more like comedic and you know, kind of like, what would you call it? Like memey, you know, with like
Yeah.
sunglass memes with blunts and, you know, all that. But they're still fun, so all right, anyway.
People whose careers are and their lives are completely
normally-
ruined by allegations that are brought a decade or more after the event. Now, obviously, if the person was a minor at the time of the incident, or the alleged incident,
I
then
can't believe you're
fine.
saying this,
There
that we shouldn't
be a
bring up historic assault claims.
I don't
That's
think-
absolutely
I don't think
crazy.
you should be bringing
Women
up
would have been too
Historic.
afraid.
Historic, like it was written in on a tablet, like it was on a like it was like on a sundial and some like
It's in the
ancient-
hieroglyphs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
They
in
found it in the
hier-
cave paintings.
Ramses the second was up to some shit.
They're discussing this inaccurately. It's not about whether or not these assault claims should be brought up. It's about whether a woman has a right to hold an assault claim until well past the time period where her target of her allegation has the opportunity to do things like preserve emails and text messages and things between the two of them that would prove his innocence if she's lying.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you know, it's one thing maybe in the 80s where a guy might keep all of the love letters, right? But you don't even have the same phone that you had 5 years ago in most instances, right? If your phone doesn't last 5 years now. Your computer, your email address might last 5 years, but you delete your emails, you trash your emails if they're not important. Which now, you know, guys should preserve every text message they get from any girl they have sex with, every email, every communication, and keep them in a folder forever because of this idea that, you know, she can 10 years down the road come along and say, well, I didn't consent to this one interaction that we had 10 years ago, and you're a rapist now, you know. Like guys end up having to keep all that stuff,
And
and not for sentimental reasons. Like even if you hate her, even if she hates you. In fact, if that's the case, you are more obligated to keep that stuff.
Yeah, I wonder if you are able to like contact your phone service provider and get like printouts of those documents, even if you don't, like if you lose them or whatever.
Well, I wouldn't expect him to have them 10 years later.
Well,
honestly.
10 years, no. 10 years, no. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
time of the incident, or the alleged incident,
I
then
can't believe you're
fine.
saying this,
There
that we
shouldn't be
shouldn't
a
bring up historic assault claims.
I don't
That's
think-
absolutely
I don't
crazy.
think you should be bringing-
Women who
I
would have been
don't-
too afraid to confront it at the time because they
Why?
were too young or too
Right,
powerless
I
to
said
bring it
about-
up in
I
the
said
first
about
You
place.
see,
Youth-
I would actually side slightly with Ava here in the sense that I don't have a problem with historic crimes. For example, Harvey Weinstein, they're all
There's gotta be
historic.
a cut-off
yeah, but,
point that
yeah, but-
hasn't
well,
there?
has there
Should
actually?
be.
For someone
I
like
think there
Harvey,
has, because it
for someone like
depends
Harvey
on the
Weinstein,
evidence.
should there be a cut-off point, or should the victims who were all bullied and scared
I think it
to come
depends
forward,
what the...
right?
It depe-
Well,
See, this
do
is
we
the-
know that's true though, or is that just what they
no.
would say?
No, that's
Like
just
that's
what,
the thing. That's the
just-
question.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the media narrative around Harvey Weinstein, and this is the reason why I get so pissed off when people who think of themselves as, you know, exercising common sense and moderate, you know, anti-feminism or whatever it is, when they talk about the Me Too movement, they make the same exact mistake that everyone else does. They validate it first, which it doesn't need to be validated because the evidence against Weinstein, as far as I know, is not there. It's just not. Like, he wasn't pinning women down and having his way with them. That did not happen. Like that, there's no
And
evidence.
there's
of that.
not medical reports. There's not
there's no evidence
images.
of that.
There's not right.
Exactly. But what we do know is there were young starlets, and sometimes he asked, for a private meeting with them, and sometimes they seeked him out, because I had like a guest on my show. I'm trying to remember her name, Lisa Brighton, I think. And she used to be an entertainment journalist, and she had a twin sister, and they both did this stuff together. And Lisa Brighton told me that she used to go to some, kind of like Hollywood parties and gatherings, and there were women who would show up there, young, attractive, and they were looking for people like Harvey Weinstein. I mean, not just him, like any producer, big shot, so that they could like nab a role, and they were willing to do sexual favors to get it. And like one of the things that this also really upsets me about is that there is this assumption of female purity. Like they would never do that.
Right.
Like they would no, I'm serious, because this is how we're at the point now where everyone's just like, well, we all know Harvey Weinstein is a piece of shit. And I'm like, no, we don't. We don't know. It's still there's still a court battle going on right now, and nothing's been proven except what? That women came to him and said, you want to look at my pussy and then put me in a movie? And he was like, okay. And that was basically the extent of it. And so like whenever someone talking about the Me Too movement starts off by saying, well, it started off on a good foot because of Harvey Weinstein or whoever the, any of the other guys from the beginning were, Rose McGowan, whatever. No, if you do that, you essentially give the feminists or the Me Too people, you give them the argument, because you're telling them there is a precedent for this movement to exist, because you validate the earliest parts of it. And the truth is, we already have a system for when anything like this happens, and we've had it for as long as we've had a country, and that is the legal system. So if a woman doesn't go to the police, I don't care if she's ashamed, I don't care if she's embarrassed, I don't care if she's afraid, I don't care about that. If she doesn't go to the police, then she's basically saying this didn't happen. And I'm not happy about that, but like that's the truth. And so this is the reason why you cannot give any ground to these people. No ground. So if they, even if you think, well, it's probably, let me give them a nugget. No, because the moment you do, then you're telling them the Me Too movement is good. And the worst thing you can then say is that some women took it too far. But we have no idea who those women are. It might be none of them, but it's probably a lot of them. And it might, because what's the advantage? Like, if you go to a Hollywood thing, an event, and you meet a Harvey Weinstein character, and he offers you, he basically says, because this is the truth about Hollywood in general, stars are not found, they're just made. And what I mean is that he just decides this person is going to be the shit, and we're going to put them in everything. Everyone's going to shower them with praise. They're going to win awards, and their talent, it's not that important. I mean, I remember when America fell in love with Jennifer Lawrence, and I couldn't understand why, because she's mediocre at basically everything. But it was because she was being made into a star. So, first of all, nobody just succeeds on their own merit in Hollywood. It's all people crowning each other and helping each other out, and they get like favors in exchange. Maybe they get to meet someone else, or they get sexual favors, or whatever it is. Okay, that, I'm sorry, it's sick, but it's true. Okay.
Yeah.
And the truth is that because of that fact, and we know that nobody is earning their place, right? Which is why there are so many talented actors in all over the country that do not make it into Hollywood, and they're easily more talented than a lot of the people that are in Hollywood. you know, that's the truth about Hollywood. Like, all of these women in the Me Too movement, they volunteered, most of them, I would say, volunteered their sexual services, just like Kamala Harris, and in exchange, they got to be stars, and Harvey Weinstein just made them stars because that's how easy it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and you know, if you think about it, if you really want to think about it, and it'll make your fucking skin crawl, like, this is just Hollywood that Me Too was targeted.
No.
It's not even new. This was. Let's talk about the music industry. If you think there's not and now, as mild or as what we know about Weinstein was that he willingly got access to sex and gave up, you know, roles, right? Like, that's it. Vanilla, very vanilla. He wasn't out here forcibly putting himself onto other women, right? That wasn't happening.
Not that we know of.
Not that we know of.
I gotta leave it open because there is still an ongoing trial, but
of course, yeah.
I'm having my doubts that he, you know, could be so fat and pathetic and disgusting, and yet so powerful. You know, like that.
He haven't been offered any solid evidence. We'll put it that way. There's no solid evidence in the public sphere that Weinstein did anything,
right?
Like, other than just usual sex.
But if you just take a look into the music industry and the players in that fucking field and what they've been up to, holy hell! And for so much longer than Hollywood has even been around. You know, but that's not even. It's not even in the conversation. And
right.
I'm
two
really
words:
curious.
Underage groupies.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I'm dying to know why it is that this Me Too movement hasn't really hit the music industry in the same way that it did Hollywood.
Well, yeah, I mean, it probably will. Like, it may as well. But then again, maybe the hoes in the music industry, they have a little bit of integrity, and they're like, nah, you know what?
Music hoes have more integrity than Hollywood hoes.
It's possible. It's possible. They might have just be like, you know what? I did smash that guy, so I can get a record deal.
No, there is. Well, it's not just a record deal. See, that's the thing. Like, when I was in high school, I knew girls that followed bands that were underage. That, like, their whole goal was to get backstage and fuck one of the band members.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And
bragging rights.
This is right. And this is something that's not new. As long as there has been rock and roll, there has been this thing. And you know, some of the band members were not exactly very old at the time either. Like, they were in their early 20s. They were exhausted. They were on drugs. They were using alcohol. And they were broke. Like, people didn't know that. I can't remember which one of the hair band guys, like from the 80s, came out and said this, but the fashion of ripped jeans that became popular in the 70s and 80s became popular in part because of all of the guys that performed on stage in ripped jeans. But their jeans were ripped because they couldn't afford to buy new ones. And so they all thought it was funny that people started imitating this because they weren't doing it to be cool. They weren't doing it to be, you know, like, carefree. They were doing it because they couldn't pay $10 for a new pair of blue jeans.
Yeah.
And it's because the record companies kind of scammed them.
Yeah.
And they, you know, and it's they didn't read their contracts. They didn't have necessarily an agent when they first started out and everything. So one of the things that keeps groupies that you know, maybe followed some band and fucked some guy when they were 14 that they shouldn't have been with, and that shouldn't have been with them, they may never come out and say anything because maybe the person that they fucked is broke. And they can't go after him. They can't sue him. What are they going to get? Pocket lint?
Right.
So, and where Hollywood, you get this fame and you get this notoriety, and you can sue Harvey Weinstein for a shitload of money. You can sue Bill Cosby for a shitload of money, even if he can't prove you didn't do anything, but you can't prove he did, right? You don't have to prove it. You just have to catch him where he can't prove that he didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And that's probably why we don't have this massive cascading waterfall of girls from the 80s that are now in their late 40s and up into mid 50s going, well, I was with this guy, back in 1988, and I was only 14 and he was 21, and you won't hear most of them. Most of them aren't going to come out and say that because they can't. There's nothing for them to get out of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, I'm going to continue the video, but first, I got some super chows that people have sent. So, Egregious Charles gives us $5 and says, "True, Brian. Bringing up points your opponent didn't make is a self-gish gallop." Yeah, well, I'm just saying, be careful because
it's called a straw man.
Yeah, you're basically like talking about positions that they never said they held, and you're doing it based on a presumption about their ideology. So if this woman is on here saying I'm not a feminist, it gives her an advantage just saying that, because the truth is she never claimed to be a feminist. And you have to be aware that you're not lumping in arguments she didn't make, along with arguments that she did make. So it's probably best to stick to the arguments she made and don't attribute anything else, all right. Anonymous gives us $5 and says, "The attitude of feminists goes back to at least the 14th century, and feminists named it within the last 200 years. I'd rather keep the label to identify the behavior, which I'd prefer to die, but it won't happen, since it's an easy identifier now." Yeah, that's fine. I just don't want to call people things that they wouldn't want to be called. Because then, again, it's like I said before, there's a bunch of, like, presumed beliefs that come with it that I could be making a mistake by addressing because the person I'm talking to might not actually agree with it. I mean, I don't think it's likely, but,
The way I would handle it is, in a situation like that, they assume she was a feminist because everything that she said is feminist rhetoric. Yeah. And I would just say that. Well, I'm sorry, everything that you've said is like straight out of the feminist playbook. It's the stuff that's taught in women's studies classes. It is feminist rhetoric. It's not mainstream beliefs. So I just assumed that you were part of the cult because that's where it comes from. But if you buy into their ideology but you don't identify with them, that's your choice,
Yeah.
And like I will not let her off the hook for repeating the cult mentality. But if she doesn't want the label, she can issue the label all she wants. The cult mentality itself is still debatable in terms of validity of what she believes in everything. And the other thing is, you can also point out, like I said, feminists get these things set into law and policy, but women use them. And women don't have to be feminists to do that. Women exploit the Violence Against Women Act. Women exploit, I can't remember the number of the law in India, as a preemptive strike to prevent their husbands from divorcing them when they cheat and get pregnant. 489 or something, 498 or something like that.
Yeah.
But women do that. It's not feminists. Feminists can be men or women. Men don't get away with that. It's a female thing. Women are the ones that make false allegations of intimate partner and sexual violence to the police and in court because they're the ones that can be believed, right? And no matter how feminist it is to get that stuff normalized, to make that stuff something that the court supports, the ability to go in and lie like that, it's still women that are exploiting it. And until we get to the point where women are shamed for exploiting it, and they should be, where we hold women accountable for lying and we hold women accountable for supporting these ideas, they're just going to continue. And it won't matter whether the person promoting it is feminist or not. The power is there.
Yeah. All right. So I got one more super chow. Rorschach's No gives us $20 and says, "Hey Badger, thanks for the content. Slowly getting through Typhon Blue and studio material for references, especially when dealing undiscerning normie associates insinuate, quote, men don't know how to treat women until the 1950s, end quote, or other conjectural claims." All right, thank you, Rorschach's No, for that. I'm pretty sure I follow what you're saying. And let me just, yeah, I think that's good. Thank you guys so much for all of the super chows and super chats. And let me just check over here. Yes, I do have a Rumble rant from NobaFan21 who gives us $1 and says, "Men are taught to not hold women accountable. He can either stay single for the rest of his life or he can respect and forgive abusive women." All right. Thank you for that, Nobu fan. Not sure how you say that.
It's unfortunately true, though. Like you see that starting in infancy and toddlerhood, where a guy is supposed to put up with a sister or a girl that he's playing with or around that hits him because she's female and therefore she's weaker. And at that age, she's not weaker.
Absolutely. All right. Next.
I think it depends on the severity of the allegation. Obviously, if it's something, it's a rape case or something. But if it is he put his hands on my knee.
You're talking about the journalist movement. The journalists that bravely came forward and told about how cabinet ministers had touched them inappropriately on the knee, which was horrendous.
I'm not bothered about touching on a knee. I mean, 20 years later?
Yes, but
someone should be dragged through the courts for that.
Sexual harassment culture that is in Westminster and is still really pervasive at the moment.
Well, the good thing is we've all reached complete agreement on.
Does anyone know about this case? This is obviously a British thing.
Yeah, I heard about it.
So
I will say this.
Yeah.
Once again, this goes back to, did she present evidence? Right? If she didn't have video of something happening, if she couldn't prove that this happened, right? The answer to this is, if you are making an allegation of something that happened years ago, that you have removed the opportunity that the accused might have to gather his evidence to prove his innocence, you can't make that allegation. It didn't happen. In terms of legality, in terms of consequences for the accused, it didn't happen because you held that allegation until it was too late for him to have the opportunity to defend himself against it. And that is an egregious attack on the right to due process.
Yeah. I think I need to hear this again because I'm curious about how bad the knee touching is.
Touched them inappropriately on the knee, which was horrendous.
Oh my God, was it one or was it both?
Horrendous. It was horrendous.
It's a rape case or something.
Was it like the whole kneecap, or was it?
I don't know. Was it right on the knee, or was it just above the knee? Because that's real bad.
Did he touch the patella? Did he touch the patella?
Yeah, right. Did he touch the kneecap? All right.
But if it is he put his hands on my knee.
You're talking about the journalist movement. The journalists that bravely came forward and told about how cabinet ministers had touched them inappropriately on the knee, which was horrendous.
I'm not bothered about
oh my God!
Inappropriately on the knee.
How many times do women inappropriately touch men, and men just don't say anything? And we're not talking about the knee, okay?
Women will touch men on the chest. Men they don't even know. Can you imagine the reverse if a man comes up and walks up to a woman and touches her on the chest? No,
Oh my
that
God.
just would not happen, right?
No.
So, and there's all kinds of articles in women's magazines, right, about how that's an erogenous zone. But women will still touch men on the chest in public who are not in a relationship with them and think of it as nothing because they don't have tits, right? You don't have to have tits for that to be an erogenous zone. And it will make somebody very uncomfortable if you touch them there and you're not in an intimate relationship with them. That's unfair. And yet they're not allowed to complain because they don't have tits.
Yeah. Well, of course not. And it's all like how horrendous it is really does depend on how the woman reacts. It's not really about like, you know,
And
there's no objective standard.
Right, and even the woman's reaction can change from day to day. Right? Like she can be in a completely shitty mood one day and she can be completely horny the next day and say, "Ooh, that was nice. I'd like some more of that, please." You know, it's completely subjective.
Yeah,
and to treat it.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No. I was just agreeing with you.
No, I was just gonna say, like, and to treat it like there's some hard and fast rules that everyone should know. You know, like they're written down somewhere. It's just completely ridiculous to think that every young man is supposed to know what those rules are, because they can change from day to day, from person to person.
Well, they do. That's just it, right? Like, and I think we should move on, but I do have a super chat from Pax Max who gives us €5 and says, "A few shekels to pad your hat, Badgeratis." Thank you for that, Pax Max, and I hope that I said that word right. So,
what, 20 years later?
Yes, but
someone should be dragged through the courts for
entire
that.
sexual harassment culture that is in Westminster and is still really pervasive at the moment.
Well, the good thing is we've all reached complete agreement after 5 years of the Me Too movement. But it's interesting, isn't it? So we've got lots of different views here. It is complicated, I think. And
it's interesting that they
I don't think
just sort of gloss over this allegation of a false allegation of a sexual harassment culture when they really haven't given any information on it that indicates that it's a real thing. Like there may be a sexual harassment culture, but it seems kind of weird for it to exist in modern times.
You mean in Westminster, like in the?
Yeah, like it's possible, but I just have serious doubts.
Yeah, well, I mean,
really do.
How much of that is just like a generational collision where, you know, like I think people of older generations are probably more open to, you know, physical affection, physical touch, right? So the men are, you know, they'll shake hands, they'll give each other bro hugs, you know, they'll put and you see this all the time. They'll put their hands on each other's knees or on the shoulder or whatever.
When they're talking to each other,
when they're like talking to each other and they're like getting settled in and stuff like that, right? So, and this is men with men. And so when the women come in, it's the same. The women do that with each other. You know, they hug each other. They might even do like the you know, the cheek kiss thing where it's like left side, right side. And then
to me the problem comes in.
I'm just saying though, the
problem comes in not where a man is doing something, but when a woman is uncomfortable with it, she doesn't say, "Hey, I don't like it when you do that. Don't do that."
Right. Yeah, but there's plenty of ways to do that.
Because most men, like the overwhelming majority of men, will be embarrassed. You say, "Oh, I don't like it when you do that. Please don't do that." They will stop immediately and they'll never do it again, and they'll apologize, and they'll sometimes turn beet red, right? Like I've seen guys blush all the way up to their scalp. Where you know they've been awkward, and I've said, "Hey, you know, like don't do that." And it's doesn't even have to be sexual. Like I am painfully ticklish around my rib cage. Like you can actually hurt me tickling my ribs, and you know, so somebody patting you on the side, like when they hug and they go to pat your back, but they're patting like down lower on the rib cage can actually get me. And I've said, hey, not that spot. It's really sensitive. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. And like, it's okay. It's not a big deal. It's just don't do it again. And you guys will fall all over themselves apologizing about that.
Mm-hmm.
And these women, when they come back later and they say, well, this guy did this, or did you tell him? Did you say, I'm not comfortable with that? Or did you just let him keep doing it? Mm-hmm. And then come back 10 years later, oh, I'm such a victim. He was so aggressive. I'm so traumatized. Poor me. Because that's bullshit. It's just absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
Say something.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess, like, because she's saying that this is, like, some kind of, what do you call it? Epidemic, right? And I believe that what's really happening is you got old boomer politicians that are used to a certain level of intimacy when talking with their peers. It's not sexual. It's nothing like that. It's like people used to do that shit. And now, because of the Me Too movement and everything, everyone is on guard, because they don't want to get in trouble. And some old guys and probably like older women, they forget that sometimes. And this woman is trying to claim that this is a really big problem of, like, sexual violence going on in the in the parliament or whatever. And it's like, no, it's not that at all. It's basically boomers interacting with Gen Xers, interacting with maybe millennials, and they all have a different idea of what is a comfortable level. And the fact is, I think the boomers got it right, but the problem is that we're not allowed to do that anymore. So I think that at least in terms of where I think her claims are, I'm not necessarily talking about what I'm not making a prescriptive argument, but in terms of her claims, I think that she is really not on the money. Like, I think that she's basically demonizing old people for being old. It's all that. So, all right, let's play the rest of this, I think.
It's interesting, isn't it? So we've got lots of different views here. It is complicated, I think. And I would argue, but maybe a man shouldn't argue this at all, but I would argue the pendulum may have swung a little too far. You don't think it swung far enough. Mm-hmm. You probably are on my side. You probably are too. But I'm not sure we should really be taking sides either. It's a complex minefield. And I think that when you start using phrases like that, you should be terrified. Nobody should be terrified on any side of this. I don't.
All right, well, yeah, he ended it in a, what's the word? Diplomatic way? Yeah.
Which is kind of the job of a host like that.
Yeah. But nonetheless, I think the idea that this is complicated, which is what he's trying to end it on, like, oh, I guess we're not going to figure this out for decades. I think that's bullshit. I think it's all like, we're basically just lying to each other to make the woman feel better about herself, because this climate was created by women who were just out here trying to get something, maybe, restrict men, maybe to get some guy fired, but also to get paid. Like, there's a number of different reasons why they would do it. And we gave that to them. And we also ruined, men's ability to try and form relationships with women, and women's ability to do the same. And now we're living with this, and people are meeting up, and they're invoking feminism, and they're invoking Me Too myths, like the Harvey Weinstein thing, and they're using it to basically say, well, we still kind of need this now. And a bunch of people are just going to say, okay, that's good, we'll accept that. Yeah, well, we do kind of need this right now. And it's just going to, like, make all of that worse. Like, they're not actually addressing anything, and they need to stop accepting these baseline ideas that are being used against them. Even if they sound rational, they're not, because they're lies. All right. I
They
got.
get used in a really bad way too. I will say really briefly, the people who push this kind of thing have also done like where they've created forums for girls to complain to each other about this stuff, and they get into the realm of campfire stories, and they get into the realm of turning things into allegations that are not even accusing somebody of doing anything wrong. Like I read one time where the girl basically was playing victim of the fact that some guys used the same bus stop that she used, and they sat near her on the bench, and then they sat near her on the bus. That was it. They didn't do anything to her. They didn't touch her. They didn't talk to her. They didn't lean over her. They didn't leer at her or any weird shit. They just sat near where she was sitting, and she was terrified.
Mm-hmm.
And that's her whole allegation. And you can imagine if that becomes the norm, that kind of victim signaling becomes the norm, and it gets mixed up with this Me Too shit and laws that make the man guilty as soon as a woman makes an allegation. You could have a future where a woman could come out 10 years after the fact and say, he sat too close to me on the bus one time and I was terrified and he refused to move. Didn't have to say anything to him about, hey, I'm going to move because I like my space, or something. And he suddenly has sexually harassed her 10 years ago when it was normal for people to sit near each other on a bus.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's where we're headed with this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And the definition of harassment is just going to keep growing. All right. So I got a super chow from Rorschach's No for $5. And he says, speaking of women stepping over boundaries touching men, this reminds me of a recent pic of a Dwayne Johnson lookalike. There's a woman open mouth biting on his chest. I question whether or not she had explicit permission. Well, I don't know if there's any way to find out. So, but thank you for the super chow. And, it's this is the thing, like, if he didn't get, or if she didn't get consent to do that, there's a pretty good chance that he doesn't care, because men generally don't get hung up on that kind of thing. So even if it's something that she shouldn't have done, she's probably not going to see, like, any allegations, because he's probably fine with it. I mean, in a normal, healthy, common sense relationship, people will do things like that without asking for permission. And the partner will be fine with it. So I wouldn't.
Yeah,
wanna,
I mean, I don't think there's a man alive that's going to turn down a hot woman coming over and putting her mouth on any part of his body.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but I'm saying, like, in normal, healthy, romantic and sexual relationships, people are not, like, taking account of every physical touch. Like, they just do what they want to do in most cases. Don't let the feminist narrative make you think that things are, like, as bad as they seem when they tell the stories. Most people have it figured out, like the average person. Feminists want them to not be able to figure it out. That's what they're trying to do. They want the woman, away from the Dwayne Johnson lookalike or whatever. So, all right. Anyway, that is, let me just check and make sure I didn't miss any Rumble rants. No, I did not. So I guess we finished the video. Yay. Right? That's worthy.
That means we have to come up with something new to do next week.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure there will be plenty.
Oh yeah, there is always plenty.
Yeah. So we're gonna wrap it up here, and we're gonna go into the patron show. So if you guys want to join us on the patron show, go to feedthebadger.com. Wait, is that it? Yeah, feedthebadger.com. And start up a monthly subscription. There is, like, a link right there on the main page, and you'll be able to $5 a month will get you into the Discord, where there's like all this community stuff going on, and in addition to that, there's you know, like events. They got game nights, they got movie nights, and there's lots to do. So please consider doing that. Again, that's feedthebadger.com. Also, our monthly fundraiser is still going on. If you guys could donate to that, that is feedthebadger.com/support. Pretty sure. Or you could just go to feedthebadger.com and follow the links. You'll see them on the main page. All right. So, if you guys like this video, please smash the like button. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we did on the show today. And most importantly, please share this video because sharing is caring. Thank you guys so much for coming on today's episode of HBR Talk. And we will see you all in the next video.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.